Hello guys, and welcome to this IELTS reading video lesson. This is Kris from the IELTS School of Toronto, and during this lesson we will see how to complete heading exercises, matching heading exercises, which are one of the most challenging types of exercises in the IELTS reading. Before we see the steps to follow to complete matching heading exercises, let me briefly introduce myself. So my name is Kris and I teach for the IELTS School of Toronto. I have a PhD in English language teaching from the Aston University in England, and I also have a diploma in English language teaching from University of Cambridge. I have been teaching IELTS for quite a long time now, for around 25 years. Okay, the important numbers. If you were taking the general training test, you are likely to encounter 5 to 6 passages in the IELTS reading text. There are 40 questions and the time given to you to complete the test is 60 minutes. And if you are taking the IELTS academic reading test, there are 3 passages, 40 questions and 60 minutes. One of the 3 passages is always more challenging than the other 2 passages, but you should not assume that that is the 3rd passage. This changes from one test to another, meaning if you're taking the test this Saturday, the difficult passage might be the 1st passage, and if you're taking it in 2 weeks from now, the difficult passage might be the 3rd one. So again, one passage is always more challenging than the other 2 passages, but there is no precise order for that. This is confidential information. IELTS does not release that beforehand. The main difference between the academic reading test and the general reading test are the sources that IELTS uses. For the general reading test, IELTS uses a variety of sources that are typically encountered during your everyday life in an English-speaking country. So if you take the general reading test, you are likely to see texts such as timetables, staff training materials, newspapers, and so on. So texts taken from newspapers and so on. And if you're taking the academic test, IELTS uses texts that are taken from academic journals published in different countries. So the texts themselves used in the academic reading test are more academic in nature. And this is the main difference between the 2 tests. IELTS uses the same type of tasks, the same type of questions in both tests, such as gap filling, choosing heading, multiple choice, categorizing, and so on. It is very, very important to become familiar with each of these type of exercises, to know what to do during the preparation time so that you can get the answer right. For different type of exercises, you should use different reading strategies to complete each type of exercise. As said already during this lesson, we will see the steps to follow to complete reading, matching heading exercises, and we'll focus. So what we've got here is a variety of reading skills and strategies that you need to be good at to perform well in the IELTS listening test. Today, we will focus on a couple of these strategies, such as reading for a reason, doing close reading, which means reading for understanding. This is an example of matching heading exercise. So what IELTS does, IELTS gives you a list of headings and then it asks you to find the appropriate heading. So it gives a list of heading, then it gives you 5 or 7 paragraphs, and it asks you to match this heading to paragraph 1, this heading to paragraph 2, and so on. Basically, you need to find the right heading for each paragraph. There are always more headings than paragraphs. And as I already said, many test takers do find this type of exercise very challenging, very difficult. There are different approaches. 3 of them are listed on this slide. What I want you to do right now, read them very quickly and decide. Well, the approaches are here actually. So what I want you to do right now is which of these approaches, A, B, C, D, is the best approach to follow. I'll give you a minute for that. Please do read each of these, and which of these would you follow? All right. In order to understand what's the best thing to do, let us look at an example together. This is the first sentence of a paragraph. So the sentence reads, "The Mona Lisa is a half-length portrait of a woman by the Italian artist Leonardo da Vinci." What do you expect to read in the second sentence? What do you think the author, how do you think the author will continue this paragraph? And again, I'll give you a very brief moment, perhaps to jot down a couple of ideas to try to write the second sentence. So, can you please write a second sentence that follows this sentence, the third sentence of this paragraph? If you try to follow me, if you try to write a second sentence, it will be more useful, the whole lesson. So participate actively in the lesson if you want to get the most out of this video lesson. All right. In every sentence, we do have the subject, and the subject is usually the first word. Well, usually not always, actually. And the subject is very, very important. If I am giving a lecture and I start the lecture with, "The Mona Lisa is," what I'm trying to do right now, I'm trying to attract your attention. So Mona Lisa is the most important thing. And the subject is very, very important when we complete heading exercises. And we've got also the object or the complement, which is usually at the very end of a sentence. This is how the sentence, this is the actual paragraph, this is how the sentence continues. So the second sentence goes like, "The painting, thought to be a portrait of Lisa Gherardini, is believed to have been painted between these and these years." As you see, most of the time, when we speak and when we write in English, what we do, we go back to the subject. So in this case, the painting is giving more information about Mona Lisa. And this is a notion, this is an idea very, very important that you need to keep in mind when you complete heading exercises. However, that is not always the case. In this case, the second sentence is giving details about the artist, about Da Vinci. So the second sentence is saying the artist was born on April 15 in Italy, just outside Florence. So this might also be the case. Instead of going back to the subject, the author might go back to the object. Although this is not very common most of the time, when we speak and when we write, this is the case, but the author might also expand by going back to the object, by giving some information about the object. So, what we do in IELTS heading exercises, it's a good idea to read the first sentence of the paragraph, which is very often the topic sentence. So we read this sentence and we ask ourselves, what is this sentence telling me? This sentence, this particular sentence, is telling me something about Mona Lisa portrait painted by Da Vinci. So it's telling me something about Mona Lisa. The focus of this sentence is Mona Lisa. And I read the second sentence and I ask myself again the same question. What is this sentence telling me? This sentence again is telling me something about Mona Lisa. So the focus of this sentence is Mona Lisa. In that case, the focus of the first sentence is Mona Lisa. The focus of the second sentence is Mona Lisa. The focus of the whole paragraph is Mona Lisa. I don't need to read any other sentence because I already have the focus of this paragraph. However, in this case, I read the first sentence and I ask myself, what is the focus of this sentence? The focus of this sentence again is Mona Lisa. I read the second sentence and I ask myself, what is the focus of this sentence? The focus of this sentence is the artist. So the author is switching, is changing the focus. Then, what is this paragraph about? Mona Lisa or the artist? We don't know. We need to read the third sentence, and in the third sentence, the author will either go back to Mona Lisa or the artist. So this is the approach that you might want to use when you complete matching heading exercises. And let us see together how it works. Before we see a couple of actual heading exercises used in the IELTS reading test, it is very, very important to clarify a couple of ideas. So, quite often IELTS does not use simple sentences. IELTS uses compound sentences, complex sentences. What happens with complex sentences is the most important part is the main sentence. The main sentence carries meaning. The main sentence is the sentence which can stand on its own, which has meaning on its own. It doesn't need any secondary sentence to understand what the sentence says. So if you read this sentence, yet there is a dark side of this picture, despite our progress, this sentence does not carry meaning. This sentence is not full. You don't understand what this sentence says unless you read the next sentence. This is not the primary sentence. This is the secondary sentence. It's a compound sentence. And the main sentence here is half of the word population still suffers. As you see, this sentence is a full sentence. You do not need to read the other sentences to understand what this sentence is telling you. And this is the idea of main sentences. It is very, very important to understand which the main sentence is in IELTS, because the main sentence is the one which tells you something. So in this case, what we have is like words, blah, blah, blah. People suffer, blah, 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 blah. So again, if you have a compound sentence like this, try to find the main sentence and focus on the main sentence. That main sentence will help you understand the focus of the whole sentence. Which is the main sentence in this sentence? I will give you a very brief moment for that. The main sentence says, the way resource planners think is changing. Whereas this sentence here, it is not very important. And another thing to emphasize is the fact that sometimes the first sentence of the paragraph is not necessarily a topic sentence. It can be a linking sentence. So very often the authors link the paragraphs to each other. So this is the previous paragraph and this sentence goes back to the previous paragraph. If that is the case, ignore the first sentence. The first sentence is not carrying any meaning that you need. The first sentence is simply a linking sentence. And if you see words like this, for example, or it, or those, or that, or these other words, in order to understand what this is, you need to read the previous paragraph. So the use of these words in the first sentence is a clear indication that the first sentence is not the topic sentence, but it is a linking sentence. And again, if that is the case, if the first sentence is a linking sentence, just ignore it. It is the second sentence of the paragraph which acts like the first sentence for you. Alright, after explaining these points, let us now complete a couple of heading exercises, actual IELTS reading exercises. So this is the list of the headings given. We are using Cambridge IELTS Book 7, Test 1. It is very, very important to use the Cambridge books. Cambridge has a series of books from 1 to 14, and particularly Cambridge IELTS 7, 8, 9, 10, and so on till 14 are very useful. And what makes this book particularly useful is the fact that all these books are actual tests given out in the past, which means the level of difficulty that you'll encounter here is pretty much the same with the level of difficulty that you'll encounter in the real IELTS test. So for this type of exercise, for illustration purposes, we are using Cambridge IELTS Book 7, Test 1. So these are the headings given, and if IELTS gives you an example like that, it is alright to cross the example off. The examples are never repeated in IELTS. So start by eliminating one example. After doing that, we need the heading for paragraph A. Let's go to paragraph A. One thing very, very important to do in IELTS is read the sentences one by one. Don't ever read two sentences together because that might be too much information. So read the first sentence first. Here it comes. The history of human civilization. History, so the keywords are human civilization, history, manipulate, water resources, and so on. And what is this sentence? Ask yourself the question, what is this sentence telling you? This sentence is telling you something about the history, human, water resources. So history, human, water resources. Is the first one, is this sentence talking about scientists? No. Is this sentence talking about reduced water use? Again, no. Is this sentence talking about irrigation systems? No. Environmental effects? No. Financial cost? Again, this sentence is talking about history of humanity and water resources. Financial cost? Nothing. Health? No. Concern of increasing population? Again, no. And a surprising downward trend in water, in demand for water, no. The need to rate standards, this sentence has nothing about standards or the need to rate standards. A description of ancient water supplies. We've got water supplies, which is water resources, and ancient, which is history. So we've got very strong indications. So water supplies, water resources, ancient, history, and that's why most likely the answer for the first one is number 11. It is very, very important to look at the synonyms. So we go for number 11 here because water supplies and water resources are synonym, and ancient, history are pretty much words that belong to the same group. And if you want, you can read the second sentence to make sure. And the second sentence says, as town gradually expanded, water was brought from increasingly remote sources. So it talks about water, and also, as you see, the tenses used here are all in the simple past, which means this paragraph is about the history. Okay, so the right heading for paragraph A is number 11. Let's carry on. We need the heading for paragraph C now. Let's go to paragraph C. Again, this is paragraph C, but we are not reading the whole paragraph. We are reading the first sentence only. So read this sentence. I'll give you a very brief moment for that. And ask yourself, what is this sentence telling me? The main sentence here is half of the world's population still suffers. So this sentence is basically telling you people suffer, and it's in the present, which means now people suffer. Is this sentence talking about scientists? No, people suffer. Is this sentence talking about reduced water? Explanation for reduced water? Again, no. Is this sentence talking about irrigation systems? Nothing. People suffer. Environmental effects? No. People suffer. Financial cost? Nothing. Again, this sentence is simply telling you people suffer. The relevance to health? Not directly. Nothing. People suffer. It might be health and suffer. Suffer is a word typically used when we talk about health, but there is no direct synonym, so I would say no for now. Concern over increasing population and people suffer? No. Downward trend in demand for water? Again, no. And the need to raise standards? No. The sentence is simply saying people suffer. Let's go back and read the second sentence. So as the United Nations report on access to water in November, so you don't necessarily need to read every single word, just focus on the main word. The main sentence here is more than 1 billion people lack access to clean drinking water, and some 2.5 billion do not have adequate sanitation services. So the main sentence is this one: lack access to drinking water and do not have adequate sanitation services. Sanitation services, a synonym for sanitation services is health. Sanitation and health are words used when we talk about health, so that's why the relevance to health is the answer for this one. And if you go one by one, neither sentence 1 nor sentence 2 talk about scientists. None of them talks about environment. None of them talks about finance. None of them mentions increasing population. Neither sentence 1 nor sentence 2 talk about a downward trend in demand for water, and none of them focuses on raising standards. Again, the answer is the relevance to health, because health and sanitation are kind of synonyms. So only go for the headings when you see a synonym. This is very, very important. So the answer for paragraph C is 7. Let's carry on with paragraph D. This is the whole paragraph, paragraph D. As I have already said, it is very, very important to read the sentences one by one. So let's read the first sentence first. The consequences of our water policies extend beyond jeopardizing human health. So we've got this word, and this word, or the results, or the outcome, or similar words like this. This means that this is a strong indication that this sentence is a linking sentence. And indeed, if you see here, human health is used at the very end of this sentence, but human health was the focus of the previous paragraph. So just make sure that you understand when the first sentence is a linking sentence. Which means, if the first sentence is a linking sentence, you simply ignore it. For this type of exercise, this sentence is simply not important. This sentence becomes your topic sentence. And what this sentence, read this sentence, just one sentence please. And what this sentence is saying is tens of millions of people have been forced to move from their homes to make way for reservoir behind dams. So again, many people have been forced to move from their homes so that reservoirs can be built. This is the main thing this sentence is telling you. Let's go back to the heading. Is the sentence saying anything about scientists? No. Many people have been forced to move from their homes. Explanation for reduced water? Again, no. Many people have been forced to move from their homes. Irrigation systems? Nothing. Environmental effects? Nothing. Financial costs? No. Many people have been forced to move from their home. Concern over increasing population? Again, this sentence is not saying anything like this. Surprising downward trend in demand for water? No. Many people have been forced to move from their home. And the need to raise standards? Not directly, nothing. This is a very common occurrence in IELTS. You read the first sentence and none of these, the first sentence matches with none of these. If the first sentence takes you nowhere, read the second sentence. And the second sentence is saying, more than 20% of all freshwater fish species are now threatened or endangered because dams and water withdrawals have destroyed the free-flowing river ecosystem. So, if you read this sentence, we've got a number of words such as fish species, threatened, endangered, ecosystem, and so on. Where are these words typically used? In what field when we talk about what? These words are typically used when we talk about environment. That's why the right heading for this paragraph is environment. And again, if you go one by one, scientists, reduce water, you'll find nothing there for none of this. The only thing that you will find is the words typically used when we talk about environment. That's why the right answer here is 5. Paragraph E. Let's go to paragraph E. And what I want you to do right now, I'll give you a brief moment, read the first sentence and ask yourself, what is this sentence telling me? The main sentence here is the way resource planners think about water is changing. Resource planners are people who plan. So the way these people think about water is changing. This is what this sentence is telling you. Let's go back to the heading. Scientists call for a revision of policy. It can be because scientists and resource planners are pretty much the same thing, are people who plan, basically. Explanation for reduced water, nothing. So again, this sentence is only telling you the way resource planners think about water is changing. Irrigation systems, nothing. Financial cost, nothing. Concern over increasing population, nothing. Again, resource planners, the way resource planners think is changing. A surprise downward trend in demand for water, no. The need to raise standards, again, no. So resource planners, scientists, revision, change, and we've got synonyms for scientists and revision, which is a change in the first sentence. That's why the right heading for this paragraph is I. Number 1, sorry. Let's go to paragraph F now. Again, I will give you a very brief moment. Read the first sentence on your own. Ask yourself, what is this sentence telling me? What is the focus of this sentence? Make sure that you only read the first sentence, not the rest of the paragraph. Okay, so the main sentence here is the demand for water is not rising as rapidly as some people predicted. So unexpectedly, the demand for water rise, the sea limit is declined. Scientists, it doesn't talk about scientists, an explanation for reduced water policy, for reduced water use. It talks about a reduction in water use, but does it talk about explanation? Read the first sentence. It doesn't mention anything about explanation. Irrigation system, nothing. Financial cost of recent technological improvements, it doesn't talk about cost. Addressing the concern of the increasing population, it doesn't mention anything like this. A surprising downward trend in demand for water, it does say that the demand for water is declining. So a surprising surprise, unexpectedly is surprise, and this is the right one. A surprising downward trend in demand for water, because we don't have anything about explanation. But just to be sure that we have nothing about explanation in this paragraph, let's read the second sentence. As a result, the pressure to build new water infrastructures has diminished over the past 2 decades. So again, there is nothing about explanation in the second sentence, which means this paragraph is just about the demand for water, which is declining. Then we've got the heading for this one too, and the heading for this one is, here it comes, the heading for so paragraph F is 9. A surprise downward trend in demand for water. So this is F. And let us go together to paragraph G. Again, I'll give you a very brief moment. Read the first sentence only. And what does this sentence say? What is the focus of this sentence? This sentence asks a question. What explains this remarkable turn of events? And this is a reference word which goes back to the previous paragraph. And the previous paragraph talks about the demand for water, which is declining. So the question here is, what explains the fact that the demand for water is declining? And we understand this from the use of this, which takes us back to the previous paragraph. And explain, which means explanation. Most likely this paragraph is about explanation. And if you read the next sentence, you've got 2 factors which explain. That's why this paragraph is indeed about the explanation. And the right heading for this paragraph is number 2, an explanation for reduced water use. And if you compare this paragraph, so if you compare this paragraph, what explains the previous paragraph, you've got nothing about explanation here. But the second paragraph just clearly starts with the question, what explains, which means this paragraph is about an explanation. And the very last heading that we are completing together is paragraph H. So again, I'll give you a very brief moment. I want you to read the first sentence only, not the second sentence, and ask yourself, what is this paragraph about? The first sentence is talking about dams and other kind of infrastructure that will be built, particularly in countries in development. So dams and other kinds of infrastructure will be built in certain countries where human needs have not been met. Let's go back to headings. Does it talk about scientists? No, it talks about something that will be built. Explanation for reduced water use? We already did this one. Irrigation systems, it does not mention anything about irrigation system. Financial costs, not directly. There is no word which means financial cost. Addressing the concern of increasing population, it doesn't mention anything. A surprising downward trend, nothing. The need to raise standards, no, it only says that things will be built. That's why we need to go back to the second sentence. And the second sentence says, such projects, which means the building of these things, must be built to higher specification. Higher specification means raise standards. So higher specification and raise standards, they are pretty much saying the same thing. That's why the heading for paragraph H is number 10. So what we saw together was how to complete heading exercises. And a summary of this video lesson is, number 1, start with the first sentence of the paragraph. Make sure that the first sentence is not a linking sentence. Read the first sentence of the paragraph and ask yourself the question, what is this sentence telling me? After doing that, go to the heading and see if there is any heading which is telling you the same thing that the first sentence of the paragraph is telling you. Once you've done this, go to the second sentence of the paragraph and you'll find the answer either in the first or in the second sentence of the paragraph. Before we conclude, I just want to make you aware of the fact that at the IELTS School of Toronto, I teach IELTS preparation courses. IELTS preparation courses for both the general training and the academic test start every Monday. And I also teach one-on-one classes, face-to-face and online. Thank you very much for attending this video lesson. I hope you found it useful and good luck in IELTS. Bye from Kris.